welcome to United View. Hope you guys are doing well. Smash a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. As promised, I said we'll be having a catch up with the Athletics, Laurie Whitwell. Big up to Laurie. He has come through. He has stuck to his word. He's a man of his word. Big up to you, Laurie. How you doing, man?
I'm good, Flex. Thanks so much for having me on. Of course, do this for you. Stick to my word every time with you.
He never doesn't. We've been wanting to have you on for a little while, have a good catch up. First of all, like I've said to you on a personal, but to everyone here at United View as well, and the viewers, some of the stuff you've been doing, some of the reporting you've been doing, some of the pieces you've been putting together at the Athletic have been just really insightful. A lot of due diligence done, not just spouting, nonsense for sensationalism. And I know that's not your style as a journo as well, but it is refreshing to see. We've enjoyed sort of getting some of the info and taking it in. So big up to you first of all on your reporting,
Thanks very much, pal. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Yeah, obviously it does take a lot of time and effort, but worth it in the end, I think.
Yes, definitely, especially with where we're at as a club now. Let's get straight into it, man. Look, where we're at now with Eric, I mean, we saw him speaking on Dutch TV, very to the point, which was refreshing. We covered it this morning on the show, and me and Owen was like, you know what? I like it. It's, in Dutch TV, it's a bit different, the punditry.
Yeah.
And the fact that he said, I know they spoke to Tuchel, but they realised they got the best manager in me. I'm the best, me. It come across like that. But more to the point, which is what you're picking up on in some of your pieces, is that they are in this sort of next phase of deliberation about what this new contract looks like. And Eric did say in the quotes that this bit is not easy, but there are still some stuff to talk about. How do you understand that situation to be with some of the things Eric might ask for or not want to fall back on versus the things that INEOS will want to change versus their non-negotiables? How do you understand that to be?
Yeah, I mean, just on your point on going on Dutch TV, I think it was really interesting that he was able to do that for an England game as well. And we saw some quotes about Gareth Southgate afterwards. And I agree with you that I think he was kind of feeling himself. I think he had to, because his authority, his reputation has been tested severely in this process where INEOS did speak to a lot of candidates, and players will have been watching that and thought, okay, is this guy on borrowed time? Even though they're saying they're going to stick with him, is it going to be a few months into the new season and then it all unravels again? So I think he's, come out there very strongly and sort of said, I am the boss still, but it's not going to be straightforward. And yeah, there's going to be a bit of kissing and making up to do, I suppose. INEOS came into this, I think, intending to stick with him in the beginning, before the Crystal Palace game. I think that did sort of change perspectives on what was going on, not least because of the results, but also the questions about had it reached the end of the road with Eric and these players and the kind of style of football or the approach that INEOS want to take. And that's kind of where we're getting to now with these contract negotiations, because ideally they have a head coach. They want the power really to be in that hierarchy above, so your sporting director, your technical director, so that the continuity from sort of manager to manager can be maintained, and we don't get this situation where we flip between, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and Jose Mourinho, and then the signings are, sort of not really fitting into one cohesive strategy. So that's where they're coming from. Ten Hag will say, I still need to be the guy with the most power at the club. I can't be a bystander in recruitment. But I think there is some compromises there to be had. I mean, the big thing is he's got a transfer veto written into his contract. So do they, want to take that out of it in this new contract? I don't know in terms of reality, does that materially affect things? Because would they really want to buy a player that the manager doesn't want anyway? But these are the kind of discussions that they're having. And obviously the length of contracts, I'm sure financial terms are part of it as well. And then also beyond that, there's been some conversations about the kind of coaching staff and the makeup there. So Eric is the first person that they would go to. And then they go to speak to, Mitchell and Steve in terms of, I think it's ultimately Ten Hag's decision, but they'll have those kind of conversations amidst all this.
It does seem like it's a lot of thinking for him to do, because I remember when Eric was going to come here and it was taking a little while, and the reports were saying that, he's demanding X, Y, Z from John Murtough before he signs this, to say, I need complete control of the academy setup. I need control of this. Do you think INEOS are willing to back off certain things of what they would have ideally liked because they want to keep Eric? Or do you think they're like, no, if you don't sign this as this is, then we can't carry on, even though he's basically announced he's staying?
Yeah, it's a really interesting situation. I think they'll ultimately come to an agreement. I don't think that's in doubt, because I think both sides have got stuff to lose now. Eric Ten Hag has got the Manchester United job to lose, and INEOS have got a situation that if they take away this guy that's really popular with the fans, they're instantly under the spotlight, and it throws the whole pre-season into disarray, doesn't it? If you're then changing managers at this point, so I'm sure they'll come to an agreement, but it's going to take compromise on both sides because they're just coming at it from slightly different viewpoints. I mean, Ten Hag has always wanted more control. That's kind of what he comes into it with. But I think also he appreciates that it's not been the kind of setup that ideally he'd like to fit into. So at Ajax, he works, he said publicly, very well with Mark Overmars. And I don't think he had that same kind of synergy with John Murty. He's a different kind of guy. And also the executive function that he was performing perhaps meant that Ten Hag had to lean into his sort of authoritative side and be, in my piece, I sort of write about bad cop with him and Van der Gaag, and perhaps that's been at the heart of some of the issues with the players because he's been the one trying to instill this discipline and what players are sometimes like if they feel like it's not the right thing to be doing, that they will eventually start voicing sort of dissent, I suppose. But whether he then is able to himself change that kind of approach if you've got a stronger leadership above him remains to be seen. And again, I think this is kind of the stuff that they're talking about now.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it pans out. I think it's a good point there. I like the point you made there about it's not in jeopardy, because like you said, they've both kind of announced that this will happen.
I don't think so.
Not officially,
famous last words.
But yeah,
because they have changed minds on this, before this point.
Imagine, yeah. With that, Laurie, in the lead up to this now, a lot of us fans are like, hung it out to dry. This is not fair on him. 3 weeks post final or 2.5 weeks, whatever it was at the time of it came out, he was going to stay. Radio silence. Before the final, he had to fight stuff losing his job. After the final, he's got a trophy in his hand. He's got to fight stuff about his job. How frustrated was Eric with these negotiations? Because he seems like because he's come out victorious, it seems like he's like, yep, that's the process. He even said on TV, in Holland, you can't even do that. But in England, that's how it works. How frustrated was he that he was left in the dark versus he understands that was the process that the new guys in INEOS had to actually do?
I think ideally, and as you said there, his line to Dutch TV about it's not the done thing in Holland, I think that does betray a little bit of frustration, perhaps more than that, because it was quite a long time, wasn't it, after the FA Cup final, really, where you'd expect some kind of dialogue to be taking place, but it was only, I think it was the Monday last week where they made contact to say, actually, we're going to look at keeping you on, and then they flew out to Ibiza the next day. As he said again on Dutch TV, they turned up on my doorstep.
Suddenly, he went to get a cup of tea, and suddenly, Dave Brailsford was there. Suddenly.
Yeah. I think he knew they were probably coming, right? Surely that's been scheduled in. But at that point, I think INEOS will say that the radio silence was because they were performing this season review, and whilst Erik ten Hag is a key witness to the season, and I personally think that now they probably have a season review with him included, right, where he's then giving his opinions and they're kind of taking that on board, and maybe they're going to reshape certain things with the medical department, with the recruitment, with the coaching. I don't know, but they will view it, I think, as somebody, a student can't mark their own homework, so to speak. So
I saw that bit in the piece. I kept referencing that phrase, and it's exactly that. It's exactly that.
So I don't know. People have their own opinions about that, won't they? I think, really what was happening was they were exploring all the different candidates and they were progressing with certain ones. Thomas Tuchel's the main one that they progressed with, got to sort of financial terms. Now, did they already have doubts about him coming on at that point? Was he actually the one saying, I'm not really feeling this? So I'm sure, again, you'll get different versions of what happened there, but ultimately they've come back around to Erik ten Hag. But I think that's why they probably felt that it wouldn't have been possible, right, to have communication with him whilst they're also seeing if they really can progress with a different manager, because it would have just led to some really awkward conversations. And once they've made their final decision, then they come to Erik ten Hag, and they obviously hoped that he would agree to it. I he could have walked away. He could have said, "Well, this I don't like how I've been treated here." But ultimately, he's got a contract. There's money on the table there. There's a famous, I say famous, it's only famous in my mind because I've listened to it a couple of times. But there's a podcast that Dave Brailsford did where he speaks about having advice from Roy Hodgson. So Brailsford was under quite a lot of pressure at British Cycling for the allegations about doping, which he denies. But he said that the media were all on top of him, and Hodgson told him, "Don't quit. Basically stick it out until they
Go
have
on,
to pay
Roy.
you off, basically." So Eric Ten Hag was absolutely justifiable in sort of having that same approach.
He's not a quitter, is he? Yeah.
No, this is it as well. You manage your Manchester United, and he has that incredible belief in himself, as we saw last night with what he's saying publicly, that he can turn things round if he gets players subscribing to what he's trying to get them to do. That there's kind of more, I don't know, obviously the injury situation clears up and there's more kind of proactive shrewdness in the market. Now that is a big question because I don't know if the transfers will be as, I don't know, compelling as we perhaps all hope as people that are covering United. But I think there's some financial concerns there still. But I think he probably feels that at least with INEOS, you've got people that are trying to make a positive change, and they're definitely going to upset a few people along the way, and maybe Eric Ten Hag as well. But sometimes you can get that creative tension that actually works to the benefit of the club.
Yeah, I mean, Ineos's job is to come in and, like you said, they have to ruffle feathers because of how the club has decayed and rotted with what the Glazers have done. And
Mm.
sometimes there's collateral damage in that. They can't be there just being emotional, just
Yeah.
listening to us fans, or being, this person's been here a long time. That's not really nice. They do have to have an element of ruthlessness. I understand that.
Mm.
What with the sources that you've spoke to? I know in the pieces, obviously, like you said, a lot of sources have been spoke to, people who are well versed on the information you've been talking about, and obviously, for anonymity, they want to protect their jobs. Absolutely. With the people that you've spoke to, or the sources you've come across, have INEOS come to this decision for Eric Ten Hag because they genuinely believe he's the right man, or is it because they wanted to save money, or there's just no one else better, or is it because they genuinely believe in Eric? What's the feeling around that about how highly they actually rank Eric versus would have cost a lot to get rid of him now, and we don't really have that, or the managers out there, their financial package wasn't that. Basically, was it about money or was it about Eric's meritocracy?
I think a bit of both, to be honest, because financial concerns definitely were there. So you've got we're told. I mean, agents have been told that there's sort of 50 million net spend this summer, and obviously they might that'll increase with sales. They'd hope that they'd sell Mason Greenwood or Jadon Sancho or Casemiro, but that's not a given. So financial terms, I don't know how much it would have cost to sack Eric, but there's a compensation package there that will have been sort of a few £1 million. So that actually it then becomes a real consideration. I think also there was a genuine thought that let's see how he does with a different structure around him and see if that actually is a factor in all this. Again, the options available, they spoke to several, so it's not like they kind of had a quick dip in the water on that and then they go, actually, let's not sort of pursue that any longer. They really did sort of scrutinise all the options out there. And yeah, Tuchel's the question mark, but I think ultimately they weren't really totally sold on any of the other ones being that improvement to Eric Ten Hag. So really, why change a manager? Yeah. From a
Nothing to do with
coaching,
money.
from a
Coaching,
yeah. So that was a genuinely strategic decision. And I think also they did read the room on the fans. If the way the FA Cup was sort of viewed by fans, it really did swell support for him afterwards. We had a poll on the Athletic that was sort of 75%, I think, approval rating. And I mean, even after the Palace game, I suppose there would have been a 50-50 split maybe. But it could have been a much more understandable decision at that point. And that is what they started working on the basis of at that stage, to sort of change manager. But I think whilst you shouldn't be beholden to the fans because you kind of have to back yourself in making those smart moves, but because the full story in terms of what's going on at Carrington, in terms of how a manager's working, I do think that because you've got such a global fan base and you've got such passionate support, you've got Old Trafford that's 75,000 people, you can't totally disregard what the fans say. And I think it would have been a strange call to take away a guy that's so well thought of at this moment as your first act in a summer when there wasn't really a compelling candidate to change and have a guarantee of improvement. And now, having made that call, they are, from what I'm told, really determined to back Erik ten Hag in the way with complete conviction, because I don't think it had been that way at the end of the season. I think they'd kind of felt we might have to make a change here, and let's there's some meetings that he wasn't involved in, for example, that you sort of thought a manager that's continuing would have been. So prior to the Palace game, he was basically involved in pre-season and recruitment, but it changed after that point, and now I think they're appreciating that. Okay, let's give him our backing fully, our energies, our times, and our sort of drive to try and make this work, and let's see if it can.
Transfers, you touched on it a little bit there, and it was the same last year in Eric's when it was his first season. How much money has he got? Then his second season, how much money has he got? And we've seen what our Januaries have looked like. Absolutely potless. We managed to get Wout Weghorst and Sabitzer the January before. This year couldn't do anything, so we know where we're at financially. But in terms of what we have net, you mentioned there 50 million. I've seen you sort of put that in a few pieces as to understanding that to be the figure. Is that still the same? Is that true? So, if put in layman's terms, if Man United don't sell one player, is that a reflection of where the club is at in terms of a 50 million net?
I think so. That was before the FA Cup, so I think the Europa League does
Yeah.
improve that. So they've got a bit more money in the pot there, and people might. So the consideration there is profit and sustainability rules in the Premier League, and obviously financial fair play in UEFA competitions. And people, sort of accountants that are smarter than me, have sort of suggested, well, actually, if they really wanted to spend some money, they could do. Sir Jim Ratcliffe could put his hand in his pocket and pump a bit of money in through the owner sort of scheme that they've got. You can lose money in that sense, but he's already, he will say he's already put sort of $300 million into the club throughout this takeover process. So, and really, the business should be self-sustaining. It shouldn't be losing money to the extent that it has done, where they're then having to sort of tailor what kind of signings they can make. So yeah, that is. But I think that it's going to be They keep saying this. So you're looking at the Jared Branthwaite situation.
Yeah.
I think Everton are looking at like 70 million for him, and the opening offer we reported was 35 million. And so I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of kept negotiating and it got a bit higher, but ultimately they walked away if they felt it was too much, just to kind of almost show people that they mean business when they come to. Yeah, because Man City have done that, haven't they? When they obviously spent a lot of money when they first took over, and they still spend a lot of money, but they do also walk away from certain transfers, such as Harry Maguire, Alexis Sanchez. So
Declan Rice they walked away from last year, didn't they?
Declan Rice, yeah, great point. Yeah. So that maybe that's part of their thinking, but really, you'd want United to be shrewd in the market. You don't want them getting taken advantage of, because then you have these situations like Anthony, like Harry Maguire, even, where people then sort of pointed to the price tag, and because he wasn't quite meeting those expectations, the pressure starts. And I do think that's a big point to draw on, that players need to be hugely mentally robust to play for a club like Manchester United, not only because of the fans, the sheer numbers, so on social media you'll get a deluge of comments, good and bad, but also because of the pundits. It's just such a hot topic to talk about. You've got these strong personalities in the media with United affiliations who care passionately for the club, but that can have an effect, and that's certainly something that I think Ten Hag has noticed in his squad, and that's why they're going to have to be quite smart about who they go for this summer.
Yeah, it's gonna. I mean, as a fan, I definitely want to sit just on Branthwaite as a example. Yeah, you said that there's a 70, 80 millions, and I've spoke to Evertonians when doing some stuff on Talksport, and they're ringing in. They're saying, "Listen, this guy's in." Oh, mate, this lad, he's an ex Bobby Moore, and
Yeah.
he's gonna be generational. He could do everything. You spent 80 million on Harry Maguire. He's only 21. I'm telling you now, Fleck, he is the man. So we want 70 to 80. And I'm like, look, at the end of the day, we're looking at that June 30th deadline for the PSR situation for a lot of clubs. Everton have already been docked point from last season. They've got this new stadium on the horizon. Yes, this is football and business. This isn't sentiment and, we feel sorry for you. You're in a financial situation as well. And I want to see Sir Jim and those guys who make the decisions be like, listen, we know you need money. So yeah, I like that. 35 million. There's some fans online, this is the problem. It's just the same as the Glazers. We're not putting in the right. Do you want us to change or do you not want us to change? And, you lowball them straight away. and then you start from there, and hopefully we get to a figure of around, I don't know, 50 plus some add-ons or something. I don't know. But
Yeah,
I
could
think we
be.
should absolutely be walking away. I want to see us go to, I've been saying it on the channel, I want to see us go and get the next Raphael Varane, the next Gabriel Magalhaes, the next Saliba. Go to Montpellier and get the guy who costs 30 million. Go to Nice, Jean-Claire Todibo, Lenny Yoro, I know we've been looking at, or those type of value, 35 million
Yeah.
euros, 50 million euros. Don't get your pants pulled down by the British tax and the English players, and as much as Brentford is good, of course he is, but I'm with you, Lo. I want to see us sort of exploit the market and be very strategic in what we're trying to do and undo that schema that Man United will just buy and splash because they're silly or the tax. No, INEOS need to make a statement.
I think INEOS have definitely come in with quite a bullish attitude. You've seen the way they've sort of approached the Dan Ashworth thing with Newcastle.
Yeah.
Omar Barada sort of poaching him from City. I think so. They've definitely got that kind of personality to in that group of people to kind of upset rival clubs. I mean, I suppose what's happened in the past, certainly in Ten Hag's first summer, was he thought he had a certain budget, and then because they lost the first two games, the budget suddenly grew exponentially, doubled basically. And if he'd have had the money that he had at the end of the window, at the start of the window, he would have perhaps chosen players differently. And certainly they could have got Anthony for a lot cheaper than, at the start of the window than they did at the end. So you kind of hope that, okay, if that's the parameters right now from INEOS, that they actually do stick to them. Because I think the uncertainty of what you're able to spend does then lead into decisions being not as optimal as you'd like them to be. But I sense that whilst, INEOS are still figuring this thing out because you've got Jason Wilcox as the technical director who, has only probably been at Carrington, a couple of months tops. Dan Ashworth still isn't properly in the building. I think they want a head of recruitment as well to come in. So it's kind of changing landscape in the executive function. So I don't know how different it will be this summer, but I certainly think that their mentality is different. Rather than, previous seasons where there's panic been spread, I really don't think that they will panic. I think they will, as we've seen with Erik ten Hag, that they might sort of take quite a long time to reach decisions. But at least I think with the Branthwaite situation, they're showing that they're not now waiting around. You're kind of seeing that this talk's being held at least
personally.
straight away.
Yeah, straight away. With Eric, I know we don't know exactly what's going to be in this new contract and the stipulations in it, but how involved do you think he will be with how you understand the situation to be? How involved do you think he will be with transfers? And who from the INEOS side, the fact that Dan Ashworth and Omar Barada are not there yet, more so Dan Ashworth, we don't even know when. Omar Barada, is it early July or mid-July he's going to be there?
July the 8th, I think.
July the 8th. Who is going to head up sort of the decision-making from the transfers and from the INEOS side, the people they've brought in, and how involved do you think Eric will be in this new contract this summer?
I think once Barada starts, I think he's probably the top guy in that tree because he's obviously done that kind of work at City, with Erling Haaland and other players. So he's been in that world. Jason Wilcox has definitely done that at the academy at Man City, which is just the academy. It's not sort of senior level, but it's very competitive, that area, and being able to get deals done is, you need to have connections, you need to have certain contact. But I think that's going to be growing for Jason Wilcox because he was at Southampton prior to Man United. It is a different level, I think, of the kind of people that you're speaking to. I think Ten Hag definitely will be involved. He'll want to be involved for whatever happens with this transfer veto written into his contract or not. I think he will want a voice in the process, and I don't think INEOS would want to deprive him of that. But it's those moments where, when push comes to shove, who really kind of puts the foot down. And I guess it will have to be collaboration, right? It'll have to be. I think he would genuinely, like you said earlier, he would appreciate if you've got some really strong recruitment, scouting data points to propose a player that he might not have heard of, but then he can watch on video maybe, and there's obviously not going to be time to watch in person during a summer, but if he hasn't seen them before, but come round to the idea, okay, yeah, let's go for this guy as well, and then it's a kind of cohesive unit. I think a couple of other people to kind of mention, perhaps in the back room or the behind the scenes, is Andy O'Boyle, who was deputy football director to John Murtagh. I think his role has become more prominent in Murtagh's departure, and Matt Hargreaves is the head of negotiations for United. So I think he's now got increased sort of latitude with agents. So I think those guys will to actually do the nuts and bolts of certain deals. I think they can.
So they're going to remain. They're not. They're going. They're going to remain.
As far as I'm aware at the moment, yeah. I think so. Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. And in terms of transfer priorities, obviously, us fans, we always want to know who we're getting, what positions. That's what we live for, especially when we see where the squad's lacking. We've discussed the budgets and stuff. In terms of how you see the situation or what you know, what are United's priorities? We've seen widely, centre forward, central midfield, and clearly there's work to do at centre half. Fabrizio Romano and others have sort of said priority left back, etc., etc. How do you understand the transfer priorities to be for Man United this summer?
I'd say those first three positions flexed. Yeah, centre back clearly just needs. You've lost Rafael Varane, and as I sort of touched on in the piece, that was a kind of consistent theme of the season where Eric Ten Hag ideally wants a high line so that you can squeeze the play and get those high turnovers and not have those big spaces in midfield. And obviously, you can criticise him for not adjusting to that sooner. But if the players aren't quite there with it, so Varane, I think is a brilliant penalty box defender, as we saw against City in the final. But that kind of high line spaces, it's a bit more problematic. Even though he's very quick, he just can't. I think he's had issues with his knees and he can't turn as sharply as he once did. So that's obviously an area that they're going to have to upgrade and just get a player in that position that's more suited to Eric Ten Hag's strategy. Lisandro Martinez is that player, but he's been injured, so you've still got a question mark over how he sort of comes back properly from the three different injuries that he had last season. And then, number 6, just because Kobe Mainu, absolutely brilliant season, really showed that he can be at this level for several years and maybe even become a really great player. But Casemiro, didn't hit the heights that he did in the first season. He's getting older, so I think a player to replace him really and sort of take the burden off Mainu is important. Christian Eriksen, obviously older as well, and I guess he had already been signed with that view to be a rotation player rather than play every week. So I think a number 6 is important, but I mean probably more so than that, another striker. I mean Højlund I think did pretty well on his debut campaign, but the idea behind him coming was always long-term benefits, and so the kind of immediate sort of ambitions were adjusted so that they realised that they weren't going to challenge for the title. I think once they signed Højlund rather than Kane, I think Kane would have been a potentially transformative figure, albeit 29, 30, whereas Højlund is someone that you can perhaps build with. But that being said, you need support there. Martial, barely featured last season, and this has been going back to Ten Hag's first summer. Ronaldo was there, and he came in with a brief, a mandate to play this kind of high intensity, high pressing style, and Ronaldo just isn't that guy. He's never going to do that.
So I'm not doing that.
Yeah, basically, yeah, and then so you've got Wout Weghorst, and they've only signed one striker in Højlund. I mean Cavani left as well that summer. Let's not forget, and Mason Greenwood. I think Ten Hag was expecting him to be back, and we can debate the rights and wrongs of that. But so that centre forward area has been lacking, for 2 years really, and you've seen it in the goals return. 57 and 58 in Premier League campaigns is really bad. Now again, you can ask, could Ten Hag have got more from his players and done something to compensate for that, or do you just have to go and buy quality in that position? So I think
what type, Laurie? What type with because another debate amongst fans is, do you get a young? I know Benjamin Sesko's staying, but do you get another version of Rasmus Højlund, which essentially Benjamin Sesko would have been 20-year-old, coming in young, not experienced, but looks really good? Or do you go Ivan Toney, 50 million, experienced, knows what it is, knows where the back of the net is, or a 27, 28-year-old? What do you think INEOS's preference is there, and Eric's? What's best for Rasmus, or what's best for the team?
Yeah, I think INEOS probably would prefer to build a younger squad so that they can grow and develop, and certainly Dan Ashworth has shown that in the past. I know he's not the guy that's necessarily picking every player, but he's certainly got a good talent for spotting potential. So I think he was, I could be wrong, but I thought he was kind of part of the process for Anthony Gordon going in at Newcastle, and I have to say I didn't really see the quality that he's now showing.
I thought, what on earth are they doing?
Yeah,
and I thought, who does Anthony Gordon think he is? I was like, stay at Everton, he ain't done anything.
I saw that interview that he did with Gary Neville, and he came across so well and so thoughtful. Yeah. So it's that kind of stuff where the public perception is one thing, and actually the guys working in the industry, because they've got the connections and contacts, they know that, okay, this player, actually, if we bring him into our environment, he's going to shine, and he's going to hopefully improve other players as well with his mentality. So that's what you'd like to see. But to your point, I think maybe they need to go someone that's a bit of a guarantee of Premier League goals. Tony obviously sort of felt that that would have been the case, but then he served his ban and he came back pretty strong, but then didn't really do anything for the last few weeks of the
Exactly. Yeah.
season. So there's perhaps a few question marks there. I mean, we actually wrote sort of last summer that Ollie Watkins was a kind of sort of fallback option if behind Kane and maybe a
Perfect.
Hoyland, and the reaction was kind of like, no, thanks. He's not good enough
And
for
now
us. And
look,
actually, exactly, you
Laurie
just think.
knew.
But I'm not saying I knew. I'm saying other people knew and sort of said maybe he could work. I
Yeah.
mean, this is one that I will say maybe. And Carl Anker has shot me down a little bit on top of others, I think, for this. But Carl has a very good understanding of players as well, so maybe he could be right on this one.
Yeah.
But
And Carl's harsh as
Dominic
well. Sometimes
Solanke,
Carl's like, absolutely not.
yeah,
Solanke.
he's
Don't know,
not.
Laurie. I don't know. I don't know.
What do you think? You said Solanke, yeah.
I
Did you hear me?
know.
Yeah, Solanke.
Yeah, I heard you
Name as
say
well.
yeah.
I think if you
I
can get him
don't
for a
know.
decent price, you just know that he's got the quality technically, and also he knows where the back of the net is. So yeah, but
He does, and my thing is like it's like a question mark in it of like, obviously he's had this amazing season and he's been brilliant.
yeah,
It's just about the question mark of the step up, which is always there until you give them a chance, I suppose. I'm just not sure
I suppose
lean
he
the
was
line
at
for Man
Chelsea
United,
and
but then
Liverpool, wasn't he? And
yeah,
they obviously both said he perhaps isn't good enough. But I don't know. I feel like players can have these
yeah,
arcs where
yeah,
they sort of show themselves in later life.
yeah. No, it's true,
Um,
and he's on that trajectory to do it. He absolutely destroyed us both times.
It was always
So
a thing that
yeah,
Fergie
I
did,
see
wasn't
where
it? If he played well against us, let's try and sign him.
he's
Dwight
in
York, I think, springs to
exactly.
mind for that. Yeah,
Yes, right. You're 100%. Obviously, Van Persie as well. Yeah.
yeah,
I'm not sure about the step up like if he could do it, but he knows where the back of the net is. He does look like a different character, and if you can get him for the right money, who knows? And lastly, Laurie,
mm,
outgoings, outgoings. What is realistic? Every Man United fan understands that the squad has been riddled with players on big contracts, big wages. We saw with Harry Maguire last year, reported that, agreed a fee with West Ham, but Harry went, yeah, that's good for you, but I ain't going anywhere. We've got players on these contracts. You look at the likes of obviously Sancho and Greenwood, they're the first two. Off the top of my head, surely we want at least 80 to 90 million for both combined, I would say. Hopefully. Scott McTominay would be pure profit if someone come in for him. Lindelof is in the last year of his contract. They made sure they did that in January, which made sense. Wan-Bissaka, same thing, automatic trigger of the contract to give him an extra year. That's 5 I can think of. Ericsson, Donny van der Beek, that's 7. You don't know what we're going to do with Amrabat, that's 8. Casemiro, that's 9. That are all potentials. Who else could I think of? I don't think Luke Shaw would go anywhere. That's 9 off the top of my head anyway.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
how outgoings? Discuss.
Yeah, I mean, I think Sancho's the big one, right? And
Yeah,
I'm told that they would have looked to sell him regardless of Ten Hag's situation. I know that looks like, okay, Ten Hag's staying, Sancho's got to go, because I think that relationship is probably broken
severed.
beyond
Yeah,
repair. But apparently it was a decision taken even before the Ten Hag situation was resolved. So yeah, I think they'd be looking for 40 million. We've seen those reports, and that's accurate. Could they get that? And yeah, you're right. The wages, though, that's always the thing with United players, because you come with a big transfer fee. You kind of say, well, I should command these wages, but then you get into these awkward positions where if it doesn't work out, then finding a club that can actually meet those requirements as well is tricky. And obviously, you can do a kind of a golden goodbye almost and come to an agreement, but it's not ideal. It obviously affects the bottom line. So, but yeah, Sancho, Greenwood, yeah, I think there was some sort of debate. Would INEOS have a different approach and sort of look at maybe bringing him back? But I think they appreciate that it's too difficult and not the right thing. So they will, I think, look to sell him again. He's had a good loan at Getafe. I think also, from what I understand, I think he enjoyed life out in Madrid. So coming back to Manchester United and the spotlight that would entail would be a big thing anyway. Casemiro as well. The fact is, he's obviously over 30, and last season was difficult for him. I think he, as I touched on in the piece, I think him and Varane had a certain way of training and playing when they were at Real Madrid. Ten Hag has a more sort of authoritative approach, and there's a tension there, I think. So ideally, if they can, Saudi Arabia's been mentioned, hasn't it, for Casemiro, and I think that's something that there have been talks over. But I don't think it's as straightforward as Saudi Arabia have got loads of money. Let's bring him in. I think they're kind of doing things a little bit differently this summer, so it's going to be harder than perhaps expectations look. But as you say, Flex, there's so many players that I think they would listen to offers for, and that would hopefully mean they've got a bit more money to spend.
Yeah. And do you think INEOS would do something unthinkable, like, well, you know, the pieces that were coming out before this whole Eric situation of like, kind of everyone's got their price kind of vibe. Like, if it's Bruno, if someone offers, 100 million, or if it's Rashford and someone offers 85, sorry. Do you think that's gone away a little bit in terms of those two in particular? There was a lot with Bruno. He was talking about his future. Then seems like his agent was maybe angling for a better deal. If I am Bruno looking in that dressing room, I would say I should be the highest paid player in this whole building. No one else. I get that. But what's INEOS's pushback to that and thought around maybe the most prized assets? Obviously, the youngsters like Kobe and Garnacho, and we know they're untouchable, but like a Bruno Rashford.
Yeah, I think Fernandes is probably one that they'd want to. Yeah, I think they just want to keep him. Really, I don't think they'd want to entertain any offers. Even though I think those stories, I think James Ducker might have been the one that wrote it in Telegraph, was about that. I think they were accurate in terms of being open to offers at least. We're not pushing anybody out the door, but if a big offer comes in, we're not going to be totally. We're going to consider it at least. Rashford's an interesting one. I mean, as you said there with McTominay, pure profit if he is sold. You do wonder, would a fresh scenery help him as much as United? So that could be one to watch. I know PSG have been very interested in signing him in the past. When I checked it out more recently, I was told they had different priorities, but you never say never. He's definitely a player that Nasser Al Khalifa likes. The chairman of PSG. So I think that I would say, in terms of chances, you've got more chance of Rashford going than Fernandes, but probably all things considered, I would expect still both of them to be at the club come start next season.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Laurie, listen, thank you for taking the time out to come on United View and have a chat with myself and us. Keep up the good work. Keep up the exclusives. Keep letting us know what's going on. And pre-season tour, here we come, mate.
Oh, I can't wait. Yeah, LA.
Yeah, exactly.
You got your flights booked?
Not yet.
It's sorted.
But sooner rather than later, I need to get on that. I leave everything late. That's just my life, Laurie. It's just my life. Late.
No. Unless you've got a deadline. I'm the same, Flex. Unless you've got a deadline, you're not working. You're not properly pushing yourself.
When Laurie's like, I need to get this piece up by this time, it's happening.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
That's when it's on.
So yeah, exactly. You guys know where to find Laurie across his Instagram, his Twitter account, X, should I say, and of course at The Athletic as well, and everything else in between. So make sure you check him out, which I'm sure all you guys have. Smash the like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new. Thanks for joining us, Laurie. Hope to catch up with you again soon, maybe on tour. And take care, guys. See you later. Peace.